there's a lot more information on that in the report, and also on the plans that you have in front of you in the paper report. I'll go back to this, Mr. Chairman, because this is the key in terms of what we're dealing with tonight. Members will recall that when this application went to the planning committee, the planning board at the first instance, there was an issue to do with the windows on this particular elevation, and that their potential for overlooking the bungalows in Church Close, which you saw on the previous slide. As a consequence of that concern, the board agreed for a condition to be attached to the consent, and that wording of that condition is outlined in the report for you. That's condition 12. In other words, what we asked for, what the board asked for, was a number of options for the glazing of those particular windows, and then those particular options come back to the planning committee for a decision to be taken after consulting the residents. Amongst other things, as a result of that original determination, a residents group was set up, and that has been meeting to look at the construction of the site. And amongst other things, it looked at the issue of the windows here, and you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, that meeting was held towards the end of June, and you can see the concerns that the residents still have in respect to the preferred option, which are outlined in the report for you. The preferred option is for obscured glazing at the bottom of the window. Now, I'm going to ask you, I haven't got a slide for this one, Mr. Chairman, but I'm going to ask members to turn to page 42 of 77, 5B32. And the picture at the bottom, which is a cross section through the windows.
Did you say 5B42?
5B32. 32. Page 42 of 77.
We all got that? Yeah.
It's pictured there of a cross section. So you can see the window as in three sections. The bottom section is the section that would be obscured. And as you can see, in terms of height above the floor, that's almost 1.7 metres. And the depiction of the pupil there, or an adult there, shows you that in connection with the height of that particular person. The windows, all three of those sections will be opening, as you can see. The obscure glazing would be in the bottom panel only. And the contractors have agreed that will happen on the first and second floors. So if we can refer to the plan again on the screen, you can see the windows there. You can see them divided into three, so it'll be the bottom sections of those three of those which should be glazed. It's not a sheet which is actually placed onto the window. It is actually manufactured that way, and I'm sure that one of the speakers from the contractors will tell you about that in more detail. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, there's quite a lot of detail in here responding to various representations. And at the end of the day, this is a matter of balance between the education of the children, their good health and well-being, and also the amenities of the residents in Church Close. So it's a balance between the two. And the arguments for and against are outlined in the report, Mr. Chairman, as we consider this to be a reasonable and proportionate response to the request from the residents to look at particularly at the windows on this particular elevation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Beverley, welcome to the Council House. Mr. Tobin will explain.
Good evening. As you saw with the last speaker, you're given 3 minutes in which to address the board. So I'll tell you the moment when your 3 minutes begins. I'll tell you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then I'll tell you at the end of the 3 minute period. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening. As you are aware, the reason for condition 12 of the planning permission was to protect the privacy of the residents of Church Close from being overlooked. Please remember this reason. A meeting was held with residents and contractors where 4 options were provided to us to satisfy condition 12. We were then told option 4 to obscure all windows was not available, but no supporting evidence was provided to support the contractor's reasons why. This was the residents' preferred option. The option recommended by the contractors was to obscure up to 1.65 metres of the lower window. If you include the transom, this would take it to 1.7. On investigation, a 15-year-old on average is 5'7", which is taller than 1.7 metres. Whether on tiptoe or not, this means 2/5 of the school on average will be able to see over the obscured glass. 1.7 metres is not high enough. Our properties are 1 metre higher than the school field. The residents were assured right from the start that the windows would be sealed units with the use of aircon and air ventilation units referred to in the planning permission. At the meeting, to our horror, we were advised that the windows would now open, some fully with a key, and no aircon ventilation units would be required. Surely opening windows negates the use of obscured glass. Pupils will now see through the openings, either downwards, sideways or straight across, and our privacy is therefore put into question yet again. We are not experts on window designs, but have put forward suggestions regarding window openings. However, it is the designer's responsibility to meet privacy requirements. There is, of course, a further issue regarding noise being emitted from the classrooms when the windows are open. This should now be seriously considered by the planners/board due to the close proximity of the building and church close. We have seen a sample of the obscured glass, which is acceptable and due to incorrect calculations by the contractor, this has now been agreed to obscure glass in the first and second floor. None of you have visited the site, and I invite you to my property to see the impact this building is and will have on the residents and what we will endure on a permanent basis. We request condition 12 remains until all the above issues have been resolved and our rights to privacy have been met.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? No, in which case, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, our next speaker is Mr. Mike Westwood. Mr. Westwood, if you'd take the speaker's chair. Mr. Westwood, what you're about to hear may come as no surprise to you, but Mr. Tobin will explain the rules for public speaking.
As you probably heard twice tonight already, in a moment you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. So I'll let you know when that 3 minutes starts, when you have 1 minute remaining, and then when your time is finished. The 3 minutes starts now.
The design philosophy of the proposed building has been carefully considered with an in-depth assessment of the whole site and surroundings, which have influenced the location of the proposed development within the wider school site, whilst retaining much of the existing trees, woodland and landscaping where appropriate. The relationship of the proposed building with its neighbours has also been carefully considered, with the building being sited approximately 44 metres away from the boundary with the residential properties to the north. The north elevation has been designed to include a minimal amount of glazing compared to the other elevations, with the internal layer consisting of a mix of staff workrooms and a small number of classrooms to avoid unacceptable overlooking. Since gaining conditional planning approval, we have held regular meetings with the residents, the parish council and the school trust to discuss any concerns. We have spent a considerable amount of time and effort in reviewing possible options to address the concerns of the residents, whilst also complying with the requirements of our clients, and have obtained a sample of the window treatment proposal, which the residents have seen and accepted. We therefore believe that the proposal to partially obscure glaze the lower portion of the windows on both the first and second floor of the north elevation to a height of 1.7 metres above finished floor level, which is at a height above the eye level of many of the students, is fair and reasonable. Partial glazing of these windows not only offers privacy of overlooking, but also maintains the required daylight levels into the rooms, while the upper portions of the windows, thus maintaining an acceptable teaching environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Chalmers.
Mrs. Wilkins said about the opening windows that are originally non-opening windows.
Is that a change to the original?
No, it is not. From the original design that was submitted for planning approval, all the windows were openable, but they were restricted, which is in compliance with building control and health and safety. So all the windows on that section that you in the report will be restricted to 100 millimetres, and will not be able to open any further than that under normal circumstances.
Is that 100 millimetres absolutely locked? Nobody can
They
override.
are on restrictors, which is locked for general usage. What is able to happen is that the larger window, the middle portion, the middle window of those three, can be unlocked and opened in extreme weather conditions to purge the system. The building design is on a natural ventilation, so it's a net zero carbon design building. So what to minimise the use of energy, we're using natural ventilation to cool the building. So we have to open the windows. But in normal day-to-day operations, they will be restricted.
I can't get my head around that there is a safety reason why these windows aren't opened, and then you're giving another reason why you can open them.
Under the regulations, we are able to overrule this in extreme weather conditions, when the temperature goes above a certain level, and that is based on a 180-year design philosophy, with climate change and everything else that we have to consider.
Is that not something that should be considered in the ventilation of the building, not overriding what is primarily a safety function?
As I say, the design of the ventilation system is to maximise natural ventilation rather than using air cooling, which uses additional energy. So the philosophy behind the design of the building is it's a net zero carbon, so that we do not use excessive energy in both day-to-day operations and cooling.
You put 4 options of the obscuration. The one that seems to me to be the most suitable is where there's obscuration glass all the way down, i.e. the lower plane and the middle plane. Why was that option put in and then removed?
We were asked by the local authority to consider all options and put together pros and cons for each option. The reason why option 4 for the total obscurity was discounted was because it failed the daylighting calculations, and therefore the occupants of those rooms wouldn't have a usable environment under the regulations set out by the DFE.
The percentage of light lost by putting that in? I'm asking the question because I've done some of these calculations myself. What was the percentage of light that's lost by putting frosted glass in?
By putting the obscured glazing in, the reduction was down to lower than 80%, which failed the criteria laid down to us.
What was the reduction by putting the obscuration on the centre portion?
The reduction was about 15%. Which would have to be supplemented by artificial lighting, which again goes against the design philosophy for net zero carbon.
Any further questions, Councillor John?
No, I think I'm happy at that part.
Thank you.
My feeling at the moment is that there needs to be more.
Well, we're only in questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Mr. Westwood, sorry, are you familiar with? So I don't even see them here. It's a drawing of 3, the separation distances and between the proposed school and number, I think, 2, 6, and 8 Church Close. Is that is that one of
Are those the line of sight diagram that we did?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just have a question, because our earlier speaker said that the houses in Church Close were a metre higher than the proposed school, and that would change. Have you made those drawings in cognizance of that? so that although it looks level, that was just merely a,
Those line of sight sections were produced as a result of on survey data. So we did have some disagreement on the statement that the residences were a metre higher than the actual playing fields that the school building is being built on.
so your view is that these are giving us an accurate.
That is our belief, yes, based on survey data.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. On page 5B30, there is a diagram which shows the distance from the houses on Church Lane and the proposed windows. And that diagram appears to show tree planting on the border. Could I ask, are those trees in situ or are they intended to be planted?
There are some existing trees which exist and they will remain. One of the proposals that we did put forward was to put a line of tree screening along the boundary between the residents of Church Close and the school, rather than doing some treatment to the windows, because obviously we didn't want to impact on the daylighting into those classrooms. So one of the proposals that we did put forward at the time was some additional tree planting along the boundary. So those diagrams do show a combination of what is existing and what was proposed as one of the options.
So, for clarification, Chair, are those trees in situ at the moment?
The proposed ones, no. It does say that, I believe it on the sections, it does say whether they are existing trees or not. Might be a little bit small text.
It's a bit blurry.
Even with my glasses, I can't read it.
Yeah. The drawings submitted that those extracts have been taken from do clearly show that. But yes, it's possibly cut and pasted, but yes.
Thank you.
And just as an answer to a question of that, the nature of the trees that you're proposing to be planted, are they going to be very young or mature or semi-mature trees? Will they be at a reasonable height to begin?
They would be semi-mature. Obviously, we've had to remove a couple of trees in agreement with the tree officer due to their unsafe nature or to require access to the site for construction, and proposed is upon the completion. We have submitted proposals for landscaping of the grounds, and they will be semi-mature trees. So you will get a level of instant impact from those trees anyway.
And just one final question from me. Is there any reason that the planting needs to be at completion, or could you put the trees in as soon as you start work so that they're in sooner?
If you're talking about the boundary treatment of Church Close, that is actually where we've got our site accommodation and site access at the moment. So we couldn't put the trees in at the moment. It would have to be once we've constructed a new building and then decanted off-site, we would reinstate the grounds to either playing fields or incorporate the new landscaping as proposed, based on the drawings that we've already submitted to discharge the other conditions on the planning approval.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Hayfield?
Thank you, Chair. I think these things are always quite difficult. I mean, and it's a balance between protecting the interests of residents, but also making sure that the children in the school have a decent environment to live and to work. And I think the developers have gone a long way in trying to meet some of the concerns of the residents. I don't think clearly the residents are not going to be happy with where we are at the moment, but I think personally the developers have gone far enough on this for me to move the recommendation that the condition be discharged as being acceptable. We've waited many years for a new school at Hartsall and get on with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers?
I would take a slightly different, massively different view to that. But I don't think there's been enough consultation with the neighbours, and that to me has become evident with the two speakers, that there are some impasses between the two. And I would propose that we defer this so that one, that the two sides can get together and have some meaningful discussions and come out with a mutually agreed plan, because it seems that the two sides are still a considerable way apart. And secondly, is for people to go up there, or the planning board have the opportunity to go up there and actually see the site. So that would might double-edged one is one is defer for further meetings between the residents and the builders, and also give the planning board the opportunity to go up there on a site visit.
Thank you. I'm not sure who was first, Councillor Phillips or Councillor Morton or Councillor.
Phillips.
Just Councillor Morton.
I'd like to second Councillor Ayfield's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to second Councillor Jarvis's recommendation?
I'd like to second Councillor Jarvis's recommendation.
Thank you. So we have two issues to vote on. Does anyone else wish to speak before we move to a vote?
I think it's extremely commendable. It's trying to thank you, Chair. It's extremely commendable. It's carbon neutral. These sort of buildings, obviously, given correct balance with the residents, these sort of buildings really need to be encouraged. Need to be aiming for carbon neutral, and that will also pass that knowledge on to children. So, it's, in that respect, it's an extremely commendable project.
Thank you. Anything else, ma'am? So we have two proposals. I'll take the second one first, if you don't mind, because that removes the point of the first one. So Councillor Jarvis's proposal that we defer for further consideration and a site visit. Let's see those in favour. 2, and those against? A large number. We then move on to the main motion proposed by Councillor Hayfield, seconded by Councillor Phillips. Could I just ask Mr. Brown that within this that we would encourage I hear the developer's response to my question earlier on, but if we could plant the trees as soon as is possible to get the required height and tree cover as quickly as it can be. I accept the practical difficulties.
I accept that soon. I mean, the developers' agents are here tonight, so they've heard what's been said, so I'm sure that'll be taken back, and we can also report that back to the residents group as well, and get their agreement to the type of trees and perhaps where they are.
So, members, it's been proposed and seconded that the condition be discharged as printed in the programme. And I see those in favour and those against. That's carried, and the condition is discharged. Members, we now move on to application number 241 for the Office Church Road Walk. We have no speakers on this issue. Mr. Brown, would you introduce your report?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to move things along. Evening. I'll come back to it, Mr. Chairman. I'll speak to the plans again on the paper documents.
And we'll also convincingly charge me a
So I'll refer you to page 5C/74. On page 7 of 162. The top plan there shows you the site, which is in this particular case, it's the land edge in the dark black at the back of the Hatters Arms and the boot in, as you can see, the back of 29 and the back of 3. So it's that small piece of land in there. Then the proposals are not clear. They're not the best plans, I have to say, even if they're up on the screen. 74, 75 and 76. But effectively what's being proposed is that piece of land is now proposed to be used as an extension to the public house known as the office, which is what formerly was the boot in. Hatters Arms is now 4 flats. And the car park, as you can see, is between the Hatters Arms there and the boot in. And at the back of the blue tin, you can see a couple of rectangles. Those are the terraced beer gardens, existing terraced beer gardens that are referred to in the report. So the upper one is between 1, 2 and 3 Trinity Close, which is the top. And then the lower one is just below it, where it says in, that's the lower one. Then the car park you have there. And then this site is the same level as the car park, not as that's the terrace gardens. As you can see, Mr. Chairman, the proposal is to use it as basically additional space for the beer garden. The main issue here is noise. You've had a representation from one of the immediate occupiers there, who's neighbours the site. The environmental health officer raised that issue right from the start. Therefore, a noise assessment was commissioned by the applicant. This is submitted, and the recommendations, as you can see from that, are included in the report. It's quite clear from that report that the conclusion bottom on 5C69 is that I do not consider noise, when placed in the context of noise and planning guidance, a reason for refusal. And that is subject to a series of mitigation measures, which are outlined in condition 6. The applicant is comfortable with all of those mitigation measures. The environmental health officer has seen that assessment and agrees with it. And therefore, in that respect, Mr. Chairman, the technical evidence that you have is that noise is not a reason for refusal. In terms of the mitigation measures, then they refer to several things. First of all, slightly lower than a slight fraction. And then mainly the others are to do with providing barriers around the site in order to provide some degree of filtering. So what they're suggesting here is walls around the site, and then additional fencing between the two terraces, which I referred to before, the upper and lower terraces, and between the lower terrace and the car park, and between the site and the car park. Basically, it's a filtering exercise to ensure that noise is filtered. It has to go through a series of barriers before it gets to the properties in 29 and 28 Hatters Arms. If it wasn't for that noise assessment, Mr. Chairman, in the Environmental Health Officer's report, the recommendation may not have been one of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members? Councillor Hayfield?
I'm generally happy with the application and the recommendation. My concern really is over the 9 o'clock finish for the beer garden. Now, I can understand if you've got music, live music outside, that you might want to be finishing up 9 o'clock for the benefit of the resident. Frankly, people are just sitting outside with a drink, enjoying the sunshine, or the late evening, summer evening. I don't really see why 9 o'clock would insist on that. Is somebody in sort of halfway house? I'm assuming it's the potential noise from music events, which is the principal reason behind this. People just sitting outside with a pint of beer or something and a bag of crisps is probably not. I can't see the harmony, frankly.
I think we should specify they're not McCoys because they are particularly noisy.
Sorry?
So a variety of crisps on top of this. I'll just see if there's another question on the same issues.
Yes, I was just going to concur with what Councillor Hayfield said. Are we not being unfair to a commercial business by putting a recommendation on that they can't use this space that they want to make after 9 o'clock? I'm of the mind to support it, but with that recommendation took out.
Some other question or different one?
I was just going to say, Mr. Tobin's there waving his pen at you.
James, I was just going to say that if they want certain activities to take place on that piece of land, they may need to submit an application to vary their premises licence.
That's correct.
So obviously it would depend on that. I'm not saying that this means that the planning board should not pay any consideration to this point, but I'm just pointing out that as it stands, that area is not licensed at all. And if they make an application and the proposal for the activities on that land might cause a nuisance, saying might, because we don't know what it might be, then there would potentially be a licensing hearing to consider that point as well. So I was just pointing out that there are other means of regulation that may be relevant in the future.
If I could come back, Mr. Chair, at the top of line C69, the reason why 9 o'clock is chosen is because that's the existing hours for the existing beer garden. So it's just replicating, which is taking those are in fact the licensable hours for the existing premises. So in fact, it was just taking forward the existing situation onto this beer garden. Clearly, as Tony says, they will probably require a license anyway. But the condition actually matches what is for the existing beer garden at the moment. That's the reason why it was worded that way.
So I'm now confused, Mr. Mayor. They have an existing beer garden with those hours,
yes,
but they have no license for it.
Sorry, for this new area of land. Sorry, Chair. So I was saying that the activities on the existing beer gardens are regulated, but as yet, obviously there isn't planning permission as yet for this additional area. But then if they want to extend, if they get planning permission and want to extend their licensed activities into that garden, they would need to apply to vary the premises license. So that would be dependent on what they're asking for at such time as they make another application.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just ask, obviously they'll get we're pretty sure they'd get the agreement to extend to 9 o'clock with the new area, I would have thought. If they so wish, I presume they could extend. Would there be an issue with extending it to 11 o'clock? Do you think that's
the licenses?
Yeah, it's licensing. Yeah, I know it's something to do with us, but
but general members, let's leave licensing to licensing. It's them, not us. But correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just curious.
No, but a fair point. I think. Mr. Brown, what do we do as a generality with planning applications for beer gardens across the borough? Are we treating this property any differently to what we would ordinarily do?
Well, in this particular case, Mr. Chairman, most beer gardens have residential properties around them.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular case, it's an extension, and it's the first extension that we've had for some time, actually, in terms of beer gardens. And the residents here, the residential properties are right up against this particular site. So that's the reason why we asked for noise assessment, which has led to the mitigation measures which are now proposed. So we would do that for a future beer garden extension. We will ask for a noise assessment, particularly if the environmental health officer wishes that to happen.
And have we? I can't see it in the report, Mr. Brown. Have we any comments or objections or issues from members of the public or nearby residents?
Yes, under representations on 5C69, the immediate neighbour has objected. They're the property in the Hatters Close, which is the one closest to it. And as the report says, Mr. Chairman, the noise assessment, all the readings for the noise assessment were done from that objective's back garden.
Thank you. And just one final question, Mr. Brown. Condition 6F requires that the seats be fixed to the ground permanently so that they are orientated to the north and northwest. Is that the plan we're approving?
We can actually make that clear, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, it says in the report that there's a particular orientation for that. We can look at that again with the other plans to make sure they're consistent, if that's what you're saying. One of the plans does include an orientation of particular sites, tables and seats. We can exclude that and give priority to 6F. There's no problem with that. It's a question of wording.
I'm simply trying to think what it will be like and the reality of what will happen on the ground. If two people go and sit in a beer garden, they typically want to sit opposite to each other. I just don't think in practical terms having all the chairs facing the same direction will ever work. Because, members of the public, they may be permanently fixed to the ground, but they won't just all sit in a line.
Well, I'm just repeating, Mr. Chairman, what the noise assessment says amongst the 6 mitigation measures that are included there. And they come together as a package, and that's the reason why they're included in the condition.
I agree, Mr. Brown. I'm just trying to avoid additional work for the applicant and all of us in trying to deal with the complaints that all the seats are not facing north and northwest, and that when people sit on them, they have to face south, southeast.
So the squad list of drinks we can have at these tables as well.
Not that noisy one.
Very quiet.
No wrestling pattern.
Members, look, I think we're broadly on a par with this. I'd like to move the recommendation, subject to clarification on the issues identified in condition 6, because I think some of them are workable and some of them are not. And I'd like, I get the point. We want to protect the residents, but equally we don't want something that's going to be unenforceable. That's proposed and seconded. We're all happy with that? In favour? Any against? That's carried. Mr. Brown, back to you. The next item on the agenda is application 298 for Southview Weddington Lane Portico. Members, you will all have an additional bundle on your desk of photographs and other information. Earlier on today, we received a substantial amount of additional information from the objector. I think it's fair to say that some of this, you, our officers and the applicant will not have had time to consider in detail. So members, I would ask you to defer consideration of this item to allow for a thorough consideration of the additional information supplied, for officers to go on site and undertake detailed measurements so that we can verify or otherwise the information that's been provided. And as it is some time since members of the board attended this site, and indeed we have new members who have not been to see it, that we, in between now and the next meeting, arrange a further site visit. So I'm proposing deferment for consideration of the information, detailed measurements and a site visit.
Seconded.
Any against? Thank you very much. So all those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, any abstentions?
Only on the side visit.
Members, we now move to agenda item number 7, an appeal update. Mr. Barrett, anything to add to your report?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any comments? Move it be noted. Thank you very much. The agenda item number 8 is a budgetary control report. Mr. Brown, I understand you are now moonlighting as the corporate director of resources.
Well, I'm looking after IT as well, Mr. Chairman.
Forgive me, Mr. Brown, I have rather more confidence in your ability as the corporate director of resources than the head of IT. I'd like to second that. Anything you'd like to say to introduce your report, corporate director?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and answer any questions, or maybe if we can pass them on to Sue Down if necessary.
Members, any comments or questions? I would draw to your attention, particularly members, that compared to a budget of 68,000, we have an overspend of 67,000. So we are 100%, if you like, in the red. Mr. Brown, do you feel there is even the remotest chance that you're going to make that up over the next budgetary period?
I suspect not, Mr. Chairman. The planning fee income at the moment is low. As you can see from the tables, it's about £70,000 down. And that's because we're getting an awful lot of small applications that don't carry the big fees. The way things are going at the moment, I'm not expecting any large applications to come in. Certainly in 2022. The minor application will be in probably towards the end of the month, but that will not make up any the balance of this by a long way. The big applications are the big housing ones, Atherstone, Coleswood, Dordon, and Annesley Common, and they're still some way off, so we're not likely to get those in probably until middle 2023 now. They have been put back all the time, but they were anticipated this year. But as things go through, there's all kinds of delays, as you're aware of, and that is still the current position.
Are you anticipating any public inquiries into planning developments that could cost us £50,000 a go?
Not at the moment. The Kirby Glebe planning appeal is a hearing, and that should not cost us in the order of 50,000. There are no other planning inquiries or appeals where the appellant has asked for an inquiry that have been started yet. And those appeals that have been lodged that we know about, they are not being dealt with by inquiry. So I'm not expecting an inquiry this financial year.
Members, I did ask our officers earlier on if now was an appropriate time to request a supplementary budget from the Resources Board. Everything I've heard is that we are unlikely to make this difference. The professional view at the moment is, well, let's wait and see, I think. I mean, they could say it far more technically and appropriately than let's wait and see, but I think that was the gist of it. Chairman of Resources Board.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's right, actually, that we do have a look at that. I mean, the estimated outturn in the budgetary control report is still the same. We're not going to achieve that, that's been said this evening. So it's clearly a timing issue, and over a 3-year plan, obviously we expect that to right itself, but it's not going to in this financial year. And it's probably more prudent to reflect that now and wait till the end of the year to go, oh, we've missed this target. So I'll have, can take that away from this board and perhaps talk to corporate director directly when we next have a review on budget.
The process, Mr. Chair, will be the mid-term estimates, which will be in a couple of months' time, when we can revisit the approved budget.
Okay, so members, are you all happy to note it, but the Chairman of Resources to follow with Mr. Brown as a corporate director?
Shadow Chairman.
All those in favour? And any against? Thank you. As you say, shadow as well. Members, I move agenda item 9.
Seconded.
Those in favour? Thank you very much. I know we are not broadcasting, but could we